Good evening and welcome back, everybody. As you know, it's Dan Winter here, fractalfield.com, fractalu.com, firay.com, and I'm here again with the profound experiencer of SSP and a very deep spiritual discipline, Dada KB. Please say hi, Dada. Thank you for coming.
Hey, namaskar. Greetings, cosmic greetings again from the heart of the Missouri Ozarks.
And why don't you more properly pronounce your name? Because I can't.
Okay. Um, I I had my tantric initiation, higher lessons when I became a full monk in June of 1980. And my earlier Sanskrit name became a full monk, monastic name. So my monastic name is Krishna Buddhyananda. I don't know if it shows up right there on the
Yes,
screen.
it does. It's beautiful. And the
Yes,
thing
it's pronounced Krishna Buddhyananda. So that's a really long name, even in India. So by the time the first day got over after I got that name, people started calling me KB Ananda. Yo, KB, right?
yeah.
And then, of course, KB Ananda became KB. So
Thank you.
formally, I'm Krishna Buddhyananda. Krishna means cosmic, what do you call it? The all attractive cosmic nucleus. Okay,
Beautiful.
and Buddhi means consciousness or intellect, and Ananda means bliss. So he who, I guess you say, it is the shortest way to say it, he who achieves bliss through Krishna consciousness,
Which is
or more
beautiful.
specifically,
And and
merges his intellect into the cosmic flow, whatever.
so the thing that's beautiful too is that Dada KB, in addition to a lifetime of deep spiritual practice and involvement with the Ananda Marga tradition and the deep Eastern wisdoms, among many other things, in addition, Dada has a lifetime of involvement of personal SSP experiences, abductions, meeting Dracos and meeting Penny Bradley and meeting Johan Fritz and stories to tell, which is absolutely cool. So what we decided to do this evening, this is our second interview. Uh, we're going to end with Dada summarizing his story of how he got to meet the Dracos and the lesson behind that in astral hygiene, which is, I'm sure, going to be a fun story. But before we do that, we agreed to do a couple little things that are on my mind, if you don't mind, which is the last several videos we've made. Uh, One of them, several of them, are on the fractality in time, the physics of time travel, the physics of portals. We just did a great film with the Mayan group about fractality in time. And we were chatting about the fact that in Dada KB's close relationship with Penny Bradley, that Penny has been talking for years about the fact that one of the ways the German Dark Fleet, which she was the navigator for, abducted so much technology and got so much control is they did extensive time travel to the point where she was actually, her job in part was to restore the fabric of fractality in time. So that's one thing we're going to try to talk about is the science of time travel and portal. And the second thing we're going to review briefly is the other thing that's been on our mind a whole lot lately, and with a view toward Dada KB's background in Eastern religion, is that, as you know, Jake and Dahlia, many have, and Penny Bradley has agreed clearly, the scourge of our galaxy is a parasitic giant AI, Black Sun Atun, black goo cult that comes from Andromeda via the Mitra and locally via Etorthans, which has corrupted the Federation, which then keeps us in quarantine. And then when Akhenaten Moses uh, took the red pill instead of the blue pill and pronounced Aten the one God, which became all Western religions, his Atun was actually the black sun, black goo parasite, which is now the seed, the worm inside the apple of most all Western religions, as in the Muslims walking around a black cube and the black cube hanging from the head of the rabbi. So suddenly we see behind the horrible religion wars, hint Palestine, on this planet is a giant hungry ghost eating louche and souls, and the human trafficking, which is the big bucks follow the money for why the corrupt Galactic Federation locally is not doing disclosure because they're making too much money with human trafficking. So Yeah, these are a few things that have been our mind, and I thought it'd be fun to get Dada's little, like, what do you think of that idea of there being a parasite behind most Western religions? Do you have a comment?
Wow. Um, no question about it.
Yeah.
In my own personal experience, when I was forced to go to Sunday school for the very first time, uh, being in a military family, we traveled so much that I never saw the inside of a church until I was in first grade. I went into the Sunday school downstairs, and I didn't know what was going to happen. And I got all these comic books about the Old Testament and God's or Yahweh's or whatever order, to the Jews.
An
Forgive me.
angry God, an angry
The
God.
angry God, the vengeful God, right, exactly. To go and instructed his chosen ones to go and slaughter everyone else
Oh,
in sight,
yes.
in the promised land.
Yeah,
And that was considered something great. And they even had the children sing songs about it, you know what I mean?
that's
And
right.
this is in
Yeah.
a Protestant church, Lutheran church in north central Wisconsin.
Oh my God. It's appalling. And yet this connects directly to what many, including Elena, have said that basically Yahweh and Lil, that angry God promoting that black cube parasite hanging from the rabbi's hat, is also half Draco, which gets to our story later here about when you
Hmm.
start meeting the Draco in the astral and needing his
Yeah.
coherence. So suddenly how to deal with a big parasite behind Earth's religions? Question mark.
Well, let's just say that post deluge, if you want to call it that, or post recent ice age thaw, roughly 10 to 15,000 years, let's say, um, there was basically a do-over, you
Yeah.
know,
Well, and we think that
and
was
uh, and a
12,000
do-over,
years.
which it was basically it had wiped most everything out,
Yep. The Lesser
and
Dryad
then
specific.
seeds of the that we might have inherited from the Atlantean decline of the Atlantean civilization, not only the actual decline, but the catastrophic, sinking of Atlantis.
Exactly.
And the follow-on from that brought the seeds over to this our current, phase, but basically it was a do-over.
And
So
and it seems that
we've had previous civilizations here. We cannot even imagine to what extent and how long in the past half million years we could say how many rounds have we had since, according to Sitchin, I think Zechariah Sitchin, he alludes to the fact that the original Adam, some people say it was around 400,000 years ago, and he was doing his cloning or combining and hybridization down in what we now call Rhodesia, where
yeah,
all the gold mines were.
exactly.
And
That's Enki.
so we've
Really.
had
Enki.
Enki, right? Enki and his half sister, by the
Yes.
way,
400,000
and
is about right. And yet, the event you refer to, which about 12,000 years ago, Lesser Dryad, that flood was from Tiamat, dumping not just its water, but its black goo here. And then Hancock correctly identifies about a dozen ancient civilizations get pulled out of the gutter by this team called Apkallu of seven, whom we later learn is Thoth Hermes Ningishita, actually. And
mhm.
what's happening is that the Federation, Andromedans, decide they need to bomb the hell out of the Atlantean, which they regard as reptilian. It was Anunnaki controlled Anak, and blew up half the solar system. And so they had to tow in the hollow metal moon because otherwise the Earth's orbit was doomed. And now
Hmm.
we got a condition of quarantine, which we are still under from that same federation. Oops.
Well, without going into deep detail in the first part of our discussion now, but to correlate what was happening in Egypt, at that time after the deluge, the the tribes that were surviving on the surface were all going here and there to survive this way and that way. So the Aryans, well, the Aryan word comes from actually a Persian word, the noble people, actually.
Hmm.
The Aryans of the southern steppes of in Eurasia, which is Caucasus, etc., they migrated in all different directions, mostly just to stay alive and to find something else. They were just had their horses and their cattle and their barley, their rudimentary agriculture, but they had not built up a real civilization yet of their own. They just migrated, and that they were a warrior people. Of course, they had their rishis who had their insights, like their shamans or rishis, and the original Vedas, the Rig Veda for in particular, and all that were composed before they even ever reached what we call India proper. But there was also indigenous people in India in the southern peninsula who were not having so much struggle because they had a tropical life and they were blessed, they were able to do more introversial practices. So the Aryans were more extroverted, political, patriarchal, and the people of India, the Dravidians, the Austrics, and the Mongols, mixed races there, and lingua cultures, they were more matriarchal. And so they had the Tantra and the shamanistic practices that evolved into Tantra were coming into their own. So there was a clash of these two civilizations.
Yes.
And part of that was around 7,000 years ago, the advent of Sadashiva, who was an actual person who was born, who was actually also got the name that same with the mythological Shiva, but he was an actual guru in a sense. And he was Sadashiva, and 3,500 years later, another phase of that tantric wave came with Krishna, and then so that was post deluge.
Well, this is
And so what was going on in the India was not necessarily exactly what was going on in the Mesopotamia. There was
yes.
two different flows, but we can come back to that later.
But
I just
no,
wanted to.
I like that piece of history. It's gorgeous. But then an immediate question arises in my mind related directly to that, which was
Mhm.
that we believe that the caste system in India came directly from the Draco. And
What
actually,
happened? Yeah.
but
Well, it might have
to
come
finish the
directly
thought,
from the.
that
Yeah.
the same caste system hit the Aboriginals of Australia, which then became their war between the sexes, the battle of the women and the men, was directly because the Draco law was the women shaman, the men shaman had to have a separate language by law. Anton Parks worked that out. So suddenly we're seeing the Draco parasite in both cultures, India and
Well,
Australia.
possibly. If you want to say that anything that was extroversial, in other words, as we say, centripetal, in other words, taking us away from our inner wisdom, our inner source, could be deemed as negative or, you know, not so positive, let's say, versus going towards the source and, to the ultimate goal, the eternal realization, whichever way you want to describe it in any language. The caste system also uh, in India is could part of it could have roots in the Draco, and that dualism of the Draco, but also because what happened was the Aryans were generally a lighter skinned people, and they were proud of it. And the people of the indigenous people of what we call India now were darker skinned people, various colors and races, including the Austrics were basically the cousins of the Aboriginal people of Australia because that subcontinent of India, before it clashed with the Himalaya and built
Nice.
up the Himalayan range,
Mm,
was hooked together with Gondwana. So
exactly.
the people of Gondwana were the Austric people. So
Right.
the Aboriginal, the Australian Aboriginals, and the Austric dark-skinned people with the straight hair, not the kinky hair, were of South India. So what happened was there's multiracial. Now, the time of Shiva 7,000 years ago, he had three wives, one from each of those primary races. He had an Aryan wife who was Parvati. There's many stories about Parvati and the Tantras and all that. He had an Austric, Negroid, I should say, but not African Negroid, Austrian, like Australian wife. Her name was Kali, and one more named Gauri, who was Mongolian, or of the Mongolian of the Himalayas, of the what we call Mongolian racial type. So more the yellow, the black, and the red. So he had three wives, and Shiva forged a kind of a unity between the Vedic Aryan culture and the indigenous tantric culture, where the Aryans dominated politically, but spiritually and intuitionally in terms of practices and meditations and yogas and all the other stuff, it came from the indigenous people. So we had the ritualism of the Hindu ritualism of the external aspect of it, which is quite patriarchal, clashing with the Tantra part, which is quite matriarchal. And what we had was there was an intermixing of the races.
Yes.
Now, the people who were born out of that Aryan class, their skin, the subsequent generations, their skin color changed. So they had to have a system how to maintain their lineage with their Aryan roots because they thought the Aryans were superior, right? The lighter skin. And so the Brahmins ended up becoming multicolor. So the color that's normally a mental color, a psychological color of four basic colors, the Brahmins representing the Vipra, the intellectuals, the priestly class, um, and also associated with the vibrational color white in the mental color, astral color. They, though they started coming out in all different races, combinations of colors, but they wanted to maintain their superiority. So in India, the caste system was not a racial thing as much as it was a lineage thing back to the Aryans who migrated in from outside, who actually basically brought whatever was going on in Mesopotamia, brought it into the Indian subcontinent. In other
Well,
words,
I love the history. You have an excellent sense of that history, which I'm grateful for. A couple quick comments. One, when we were in Australia, the Australalia is similar to the idea of the pilgrimage of Compostelle, Campo Field of Stars. Actually, Australalia, Austra becomes AU becomes from gold, and Stralalia literally path to the stars, the golden path to the stars. But the thing that I was actually going to try to connect here was because we hope to get to Draco a little later in the conversation. We understood that, for example, the reason the Mormon took on the Draco part of the law and needed to carve their genetic record symmetry in waveforms on gold and copper plates, which were simply the sequence of symmetries of genetics histories, was
mhm.
because of their mistaken belief that DNA that changed was defective, and further, that there was a genetic catastrophe in the ancient genetic history of Draco, as reported by what's his name, the book from the stars.
Jean de Marquet.
Yeah, the
Dominique de Marquet.
Dominique de Marquet's book, who basically says the Dracos started androgynous, but then when they started reproducing sexually, the war of the sexes started, and the disaster we later called fallen, which was basically loss of soul. So failing to understand how to make the Bliss implosion fusion in DNA that enables you to have a soul, then you desperately need these genetic records to try to put Humpty Dumpty's egg back together again. And unfortunately, all the king's horses couldn't do it. So again, this becomes another version of we are a vaccine for the Orion Wars of the Draco again.
Well, maybe we can plant some seeds for future podcasts. When I was 18 years old, I read a very interesting book by Rudolf Steiner, which went out of publication, and that was something about cosmic memory. And he also talked about the root races that came prior to the Atlanteans, which dovetails with what you just said. They were an androgynous race.
Mhm.
And that then what happened was, from Rudolf Steiner's point of view, that he was giving, and without going into a whole lot of detail, he said that the genetic separation of masculine and feminine occurred on a scale and prior to way back. Now, I don't know how he correlated
Yeah.
that with Adam and Eve and all that, but also that the birth of the separation of the genomes and the male and the gonads and everything evolved. Uh, enhanced whatever future development. Not only that, the development of the means of communication and then the growth of
Yeah. Well, it
our
was
brain. And it
the
was
book
the
I
females that were the key to the growth
sure.
of humanity because while the guys were out grunting and hunting, the gals were all sitting around the village gathering berries and making the food and making the babies, and all they had to do was sit and chat all day. So the origin of communications came from the female side of the species and also part of the history of the matriarchal clanhood
That's right.
of the
And
clan mothers or the tribal mothers too.
that's how the Draco came to be female dominated, and that's how the origin of most Earth religions started with fear of women. In fact, the Draco Queen, whom Johann Fritz met, was an example of the female
Oh
dominated.
yeah, not only he met, Penny met, and
Yes,
Penny's even genetically connected to, or at least past life. And so Penny tells her own great story about that, which I wouldn't even attempt to replicate Penny's story. People can tune into that in other places. But
but that book I was referring to, by the way, is called
yeah,
Thiuba, and which also was basically the story of the origin of Draco from Thuban, Thiuba, which is was
Tuvan,
which
yeah,
was the pole star at that time. For,
yep,
and the letter of the ancient letter L is the shape of Thuban in Draco, as in Elohim, those who can make the phase shift. And
L, yes,
s-
or Krypton, you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
right?
the
El
kryptonite. Yeah.
Jor-El, Kal-El, you see,
Yes,
that's been seeded into our consciousness via
yes.
the memes of comic books and the media and Hollywood, the same thing.
And the physics lesson there is very important that actually the L, as in those who have the Elohim, refers to a specific physics, which is when the aura has access to the bliss of implosion, which you call Ananda, which is a symmetry operation that allows compression in the aura, which converts the transverse into the longitudinal propagation, which is a literally a 90-degree phase shift or an L, and propagating the longitudinal is the physics of entering the dream spell and the collective conscious and having a soul and lucid dreaming and astral coherence. So now we know exactly what the Elohim really means. And by the way, they were wannabes. That doesn't mean they could do it.
Oh yeah.
But the story to the Maury we wanted to get to later in conversation was you ain't about to actually deal with the problem of Draco and other parasites unless you're phase coherent in the lucid and the astral, which is means can you make the L as in Jerus L Uru Asa LM, Jerusalem, the Uru portal, Asa queen of, L place of the phase shift, literally Stargate, which is the other thing we wanted to cover in this conversation.
Mm.
So, you were there also when Penny talked about the fact that the German Dark Fleet had made such profit by using portals and Stargate time travel, and yet they spread their pollution of immature humanoids propagating like pollution around our galactic sector on more and more fractionated timelines, and the galactic police got very upset. Do you remember some of that story or?
Well, I remember it based on what listening and then re-listening to those key podcasts where Penny shared it. Because
Yeah.
when Penny and I talk directly, sometimes we don't go deeply into all that. We often deal more in contemporary matters, what we're engaged in here on this earth. And
But
in
the thing,
addition to what she shared, so I go back to the seminal uh, parts of Pennies is I don't remember the name of the Russian producer, but there was that 12-part series where she started out, about her abduction,
yes. Mhm.
and then she went into the Shula on Mars, the war with the Raptors, building that up to the Mars Defense Force, building that up to this, building that up to that. And this is where she got into all the other parts of it that we are dealing with now. The time travel, then how the Nachtwaffen got the trust, basically the tacit agreement with the
Draco.
Draco, who basically, as Penny often said, the Draco's pretty much considered we give a whole lot of importance of it to us because it's impacted us so much. It's in a, it's in our you might could say it's in our anima and anima, animus and anima in a Jungian sense, in our unconscious memory, collective unconscious memory of how deep it runs. And but from Penny said the Draco, they've been all over the place, especially out of, but they consider this territory their kingdom, their fiefdom, but it's a backwater. So they tend to delegate it out to whoever comes along who has the stamina and the cojones to meet their standards of getting things
Yeah.
done, which would maybe the Anunnaki or whatever. And now the upcoming Germans, they were pretty smart and pretty adaptive. And by the way, we are a mongrel species, okay?
Of course.
We
A
are a
genetic
mongrel
diverse.
species
Yeah.
with multiple strands from all different
Right.
alien races from all over. And thus, as we see even in pedigrees of animals like dogs and all that, it's the mongrels who end up being the healthiest
The
and the
genetic diversity.
smartest and the
Right.
most adaptive. And it's
Yeah.
the pedigrees are the inbreds who end up having all the problems and the defects, that are along the way, even though they might excel in particular ways,
Yes. And a good
particular
example of what
and
you're speaking.
bloodline.
Yes, a good example of what you're speaking of. When the Germans, Dark Fleet, finally got to Mars, the only way the Draco would give them space to have a base is if they traded some human slaves, which was
Yes.
the major cash cow of both the Draco and the Dark Fleet,
Oh, well, yeah.
human trafficking. And what was behind that, which is in fact that same human trafficking, is the cash cow of the corrupted local federation as well.
Exactly,
And
exactly. That's the seed behind that book. Remember the movie in the book or the TV series in the book, Alternative Three?
Total Recall.
No, no, not only Total Recall, Alternative Three. Remember
Oh,
that one?
Alternative Three. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, they've been since basically, I would say, since the mid '50s. Who did it was maybe it was Johan or one of the others said actually the final peace treaty with the Germans, if you want to call it peace treaty, was I think under Eisenhower. Now again, I'm just doing a hearsay here now, that actually the final terms are settled where the Allies ended up surrendering to the Germans.
Oh yeah, they did for sure. And
And I think it was at the time of Eisenhower in the mid 1950s.
well, Truman and Eisenhower were hiding in the basement of the White House as hundreds of the German
Right,
Hondas
right,
were flying
exactly.
over
So
in
the
19.
Germans the Germans set their terms and said, well, here's what we're going to
They
do.
set the terms,
Well,
and that's 1952, the year I was born, by the way. And I'm pissed
right,
that the whole of U.S. history is based on lie after lie. It's bullshit, and somebody should tell them it's bullshit. The Germans
exactly.
won. And anyway,
So they laid out some terms of tribute. We want
which they had to turn over the
every
slaves.
year we
Yep,
want 1 to 200,000 of your
slaves.
abductees
Yep,
who actually have various talents and capabilities we might make use of,
yep.
and that would be for our colonial population, for our scientists, our
Yep.
other
Which
cadre, or our
basically,
soldiers, as well as slaves and, of course, human trafficking that can be parlayed out there,
yep.
traded,
That was
either live DNA and or
yep.
dead people, or all kinds of things,
Which is the only real
horrible things.
cash cow of the Dark Fleet and the Draco and today's Federation, which is why we are still a farm until we realize we are.
Exactly that. Exactly.
And that's it. That's why we're here to tell people how the earth could not be a farm anymore when you wake up and have some kick butt shaman coherent in the astral, like you, hopefully, that we get an immune system for parasites that are millennia old here. And so anyway, we're honoring Penny Bradley here, and uh,
Well, the Germans who were steadfastly determined to break away, that's the Teutonics, the aristocracy, and they had already been working on it before even World War II started. They were already active in the 20s and the 30s preparing this. So
mhm.
they were working parallel to Hitler. They were taking a few of the subs and some of the money and some of this and some of that. And they were doing shuttle runs down to Antarctica, which
That's right.
became their base of operations and their launching pad for getting out, so to
Yeah.
speak.
What they did is
And
they,
so the Dracos started them out. They had to beg man themselves just to get
yeah,
accepted on Moon, and then they jumped to Mars. And well, the Draco said, "I got this old, you know, vacant lot over here. You guys can have this one," but they put a lease on it.
yeah.
And so when they got there, they found out, well, they weren't the only ones there. Of course, they got the raptors, they got the mantids, and everybody was fighting each other, and they got attacked. So the Germans said, we're tired of getting attacked, so they fought back. And then they basically, in the course of doing things, there's a lot of civil wars going on. And the Draco said, "Yeah, man, those Germans got spunk.
Yeah.
Those hybrids, which quickly they became suspicious of, mutually suspicious, because these guys are reverse engineering this left and right.
Yeah, that's right.
They're
And that's what their specialty. And after they did time
us.
travel,
That means us.
yeah,
We might be still, hairy monkeys compared to some of those guys out there, but we are really smart hairy monkeys.
that's,
And
in
we
fact,
got
the humans were known for our creativity and ability to think outside
exactly
the box. We're
because we
famous for
have
that.
emotions and
Yeah,
feelings.
exactly. And quick and can switch emotions on a dime much faster than they can,
Exactly.
which has certain power here, which is all good.
So the Germans said okay, and so they got some of that. By the time they got to Nachtwaffen, they started changing their old what we called used submarines, because you used the
Yeah.
shells of the old submarines, compression hulls, and all that. They converted all that over, and they started building things akin to Penny says, which were basically in Star Trek, the big battleships of the Star.
It started with a Mercury vortex, a double spun drum,
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
you add a little bit of the the iron powder in the mercury to make it magnetic flux, and then you add a low percentage of radioactivity, which makes it quasi superconductive, which is why they were so dangerous. And then the whole thing would actually sometimes turn to gold. It's very,
So
very.
the Dracos just said, "Boy, these hybrids, they came groveling, and we let them in, but they've proven
Yeah,
themselves. They can kick butt."
they
You
were
know?
useful idiots to the Draco.
Oh wow. Well, useful enforcers.
Yeah, and
So
but no,
they became the traders
yes.
and the enforcers.
Yeah, and which is very important, useful part of the story that's great. And where I was hoping to go with this specifically, then later in Penny Bradley's story, she says, "Well, yes, they've been time traveling for 300 years. They gathered technology from everywhere. They got powerful. They spread all over the galaxy. And then they did what Valhalla was. They went back to every ancient Babel, time traveled, and gathered hundreds of thousands of recently dead. And that's how they populated like hundreds of thousands of quasi-humanoid colonies all over the galaxy, which
Yep,
the galactic government regarded as pollution because those colonies were not emotionally mature. No, 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 they were broken. And so one day, the Federation, they called them the Guardians, came to the Dark Fleet and said, they said, you got about a year to get this whole billion person civilization the hell out of here because it's pollution and return them all to inside the Oort cloud until, quote, you learn to get along. Now,
true.
where I want to go with that is what was meant by pollution of the timelines. And when Penny is saying she had the skill to weave back together broken timelines. Now, the point I want to make here is why is it that loss of fractality in time and broken timelines is identical with loss of evolution and consciousness, specifically in the sense of I studied with the advanced Templar for many years, William Buehler, goldenmean.info/Buehler, whose only teacher, by the way, was actually Thoth Hermes. And the major agenda, quote, the Templar agenda of the repair of the fabric of time. So, what is the fabric of time here? Is the ability to restore at time. Remember, time is only a name for the experience of relative spin rate. So, when spin rates embed by golden ratio fractality, then there's compression and synchronicity is possible. However, if you got these parasitic inclusions like Montauk and Philadelphia experiment, tearing major holes in the fractal fabric of time. And you got all these huge parasites coming in through the broken fabric. And suddenly somebody's got to do the Templar agenda, the repair of the fabric of time. And Penny was saying that she has some of those skills.
Well, I would say I will never first of all, bottom line, I will never privately or publicly attempt to speak on behalf of Penny.
Mhm.
And so I would always defer to whatever she has said personally, whatever we can infer and or hear directly in her podcast or her public presentations, at conferences and stuff like that. However, I'll just put a little dovetail in there without going into too much detail to give some context to it, because Andy Basiago also referenced the same thing, not quite as on a grand, galactic scale as Penny's accounts are, but rather just things that were happening with what DARPA was doing, 50, 60 years ago in the laboratories of New Mexico and
Yeah.
all their various chronovisors and
Yes, exactly.
plasma
Exactly.
chambers and these things and those things. And Andy said at one time when he came back and he was came back home alone without his dad to Morristown, New Jersey, he walked up to the front porch of his house and he he didn't have he thought he could just walk in. The door was locked. He knocked on the door and some stranger came to the door.
He was in the wrong timeline.
He was in the wrong timeline,
Oops.
and
Vaccination.
the woman of the house said, uh, "This is my house." She says, "No, this is our house. It's my house. Who are you?" But 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 I live here. My bedroom's upstairs. Everything. Sorry, our family name is not Bashago. It's something else. But he was trained
Yep.
in the laboratories. If and when this ever happens, just ask whoever you meet in contact, can you please help me get in contact with somebody over at the old Curtis Wright airfield where the original, the original teleporter was
For the
located.
time, the
Put
time
me in
portal.
touch with the
Yep.
military,
Exactly.
and just so she made some phone calls. The car came, pulled up, picked Andy up, you
And
know,
took him to the
took
start
him
gate.
away, and then put him through something till they got him back home on the right timeline. So the point I'm just making is, in a rudimentary sense, even DARPA,
Yep.
U.S. military, which was totally unrelated to SSP and the Dark Fleet out there, had already developed their means of harmonizing or fixing
Yes.
broken timelines on a
Exactly. That's right.
on a small scale, not
Yes.
on a large, galactic scale, if you want to call it that.
But
So
beautiful.
I wanted to add that in there, that somewhere along the line, whether it's the Germans, uh, and specifically the people, talented Germans within their slave population, like Penny, who was virtually a slave,
Mhm.
although she was
True.
prized goods for them because they kept taking her again and again and again because she could do things they couldn't do.
Navigator.
Right. That's right. And the same way, there was some means, even at the U.S. military level, in parallel on Earth,
Yep.
that was messing around with the same things,
Yep.
although at different scales. I just want to put that in there so that we can have it in context of of whether it was just pure these aggregating of timelines
Well,
somehow involves certain amount of physics.
well, and that's where we want to go with this exactly. So the physics here is clear. The physics is that when, obviously, since time is only a name for relative spin rates, when spin rates are golden ratio called fractality in time,
Right.
synchronicity and consciousness are enabled. And the reason synchronicity and consciousness are enabled, basically timelines need to look like a rose, is because when compression is fractal, that's the only way it self-organizes into neg entropy called consciousness, which is non-destructive self-reentry or implosion. So it's obvious if people are out there messing with timelines all over the place, there need to be time lords and time cops. What did you say Penny said about
You call them the time core,
the time
like the
core?
Marine Corps.
Yeah,
Right.
what did the time core, what was the job?
Well, basically what you just said.
Yeah, there
The
you go.
the those are deputed or by the guardians or whatever you want to call them,
She calls them guardians. Yep.
or this quadrant's administrators of at the sub sector, this sector of the galactic phase. Well, it had to involve more than just this sector because if you mess with it in one little corner, it affects everything else
That's right.
ultimately, right?
Now we're getting the flavor here. And now we can exactly.
They
So
even had one version in Star Trek had a department that was in charge of that too. I think it was
that's right. That's right. So we're
Section
getting the
32. I can't remember all that part, but
so
anyway,
now
right.
you can get the flavor why Thoth Hermes Ningishita, who started and ran the Templars for 1,000 years, that his main
Mhm.
agenda was the agenda of the repair of the fabric of time. Now, what he meant by that was not only do you have to repair the magnetic lines on the planet of fractality, but you have to repair the event histories or the timelines to fractality. Otherwise, we ain't going to get centripetal and we ain't going to evolve. And so
Yep.
that becomes it's literally, it's the process is called alchemy. It's why Prague's
Yes.
magnetic lines look like a rose, and that's where you can become psychokinetic. And so Penny's claim that she can repair the fabric of time becomes
Okay. Those are just to be specific. Um, I don't remember specifically those words that she used that she herself had that some particular power to do to exercise to
reconnect broken timelines with her.
yeah.
That's
I
what.
think she was part of a process
Yes.
of whatever was going on. And I don't think any individual jiva or entity has within themselves, unless you're God or some
Well,
incarnation or manifestation of that nucleus, the cosmic nucleus, who has maybe
Penny's
a
claim is that
whole lot more powers than most people have. Let's just say that.
she's claim is she.
In other words, go around changing water into wine, those little mini miracles that people do, or
But
levitate, or create little things out of dust or whatever, little tricks.
we all now know
But
that.
I don't know how any one particular jiva could have that humongous amount of personal, subjective, whether it's
Well,
organic
we
power or
all now know
whatever,
that
psionic power. So maybe she was part of an integrated process,
well,
which I don't know, I can't describe.
but she did describe. So she says she's directly descended from both Jesus and Magda, and the name for that is Grail bloodline. We now know that means implosion or fusion in the DNA, which obviously
Sure,
can bend
but
space and time, which is the physics of bliss. And
well,
that,
I remember in a chat that we had this is part of a reference to a chat we just had 2 nights ago. And by the way, I was just going through the three branches of my family tree that go way back there also. And basically, in our little SSP chat room, we were all one and run 2 midnights ago. Penny said, we're up, basically everybody in here is Merovingian.
yeah, that's
So
the point. And further, what's
all
meant.
of us, including us, you probably, and Valerie and everybody else, we all have a little bit of that in our tree. I got to go back about to the second century where I started hitting the Frankish kings but if I have Frankish kings and Merovingians in my line, we all have them because we're all basically cousins at one point or another, right?
The Merivale is a name, if understood,
Right.
consists of the Grail Kings by Lawrence Gardner. The Merivale, or the busy bees, as they were called, harvesting the nectar. The Grail
Hmm.
bloodline is not just the Jesus Mary bloodline. It's a name for
Hmm.
the lineage of Thoth Hermes Ningishita, who is behind the genetics of both Tutankhamun and the Jesus line, as
Yeah.
Dahlia is experiencing very directly, which means access to fusion in the blood and Kundalini, which is very relevant here. But I wanted to give
Let
one.
us anyway, granted, I from all the stuff that I've chatted with Penny personally, as well as what I've heard online, there
Yeah.
are some people like Penny who have a much more rich, let's say, heritage in their genetic immediate upline. Okay, so to speak. We all have it to some degree. We're all hybrids, by the way. However, some people have it a hell of a lot more because there's a lot of inbreeding that's been going on in the last,
But in one indicator is, as in the horns of Lucifer and Moses, is the ventricle liquids crystallizing, which is the physics of the phonon geometry of Kundalini, which we teach that physical
Sure.
dimension versus Kundalini, which
Well,
is
yes.
very relevant here. But I wanted to bring one more.
Well, just in that context, one of the inner aspects of the crown chakra
Mhm.
or the guru chakra is the crescent.
Yes,
So there's a crescent
which
within our crown chakra, which is centripetal. It's
exactly.
not
Yes,
it's not, you know, what a Baphomet.
yes,
However, if you go to the temples in Japan where Lord Buddha, put some big statues of Lord Buddha, they have him doing this mudra, the Bharavaya mudra, which is right hand up and the left hand on the on the hand, right? And of course, that's a tantric mudra. This means left hand's I'm giving you everything. You have everything. Don't worry. It's all coming to you. All the blessings, all the infinity, all the powers. And also I'm protecting you from all the opposing forces.
mhm. And
So they put Lord Buddha that way. But if you look at Baphomet, what's he doing? He's sitting there with his cloven hood, feet and the horns, right? And he's got one hand up and one hand down. Baphomet also of Babylon. So there's the yin and yang of the cosmic consciousness. One can either take you towards the centripetal, towards the bliss and the realization, or the light, quote unquote. And those who are not geared towards that, who are otherwise centrifugal in nature, who want to go away from that, they get their own version of that. It all ends up in the same place. The point I'm just saying is from the cosmic nucleus, we have to remember when we deal with spin, we have a positive and a negative. We have a duality.
well,
For instance, if you had let's just say you had to make some cloth and you went to the loom. So I'm going to make some cloth, but I want threads only going in one direction, right? Well, if you had threads going all in one direction, you won't have any cloth. You'll just have a bunch of strings.
right.
Well, the parallelism in physics is field theory and string theory, if you want to say that, vectors and strings. But the interlocking, the interweaving of those threads creates the fields,
Well,
you could say.
it's beautiful. And even the word tantra, we now know is the ability to implode plasma in your aura, really definition of
Right.
tantra. And actually, now we know in the physics of Kundalini that if you measure the phonon interferometry, which I did with Bentoff's capacitive accelerometer in his lab, writing the book, The Origin of Kundalini, that it's actually the phonon geometry that implodes the ventricle liquids, which we call getting horny, which actually becomes centripetal with the right implosive phase conjugate pumpway, which is how that works.
Mhm.
So the physics fits your
So,
story.
in other words, from a ontological point of view, which is the source or the creator, however you want to call it, God or God, generator, operator, destructor. Put them all three together. God, God. And so that's a process as well as a you could say an entity or a cosmic entity or the source of all creation. The point being is everything positive and negative comes together out of that. So the point is, even those people who are negative or avidya or black tantra or selfish and greedy and parasitical, they go to their Baphomet or to their sacrificial god and they do their blood sacrifices, thinking that we're getting powerful out of this. They're being played along by the same
Parasitic.
ultimate. Well, not that's parasitic. They're being played by the same creator. The same creator is heaven and earth. And this, so the dual, in other words, another aspect of this parasitic effect on, especially on Western religions, is this dualistic concept that there was a fall and that we are born with original sin and we are evil and we're, and all that,
But
which is basically just an ideation to become slaves of the parasites.
but
But in fact,
we should teach that as physics, which is to say what's called the fall, which was failure to communicate with what you're calling source, which some people
right,
call God. Actually, we now know that zero advanced civilization uses the idea of God. It's childish, but they all believe in an advanced spiritual collective intelligence. And
Right.
what's more useful there, as in Aboriginal, their only name for God is the intelligence of the array they called Songline Dreaming Track, which is their name for ancestor memory. Their only name for
Mhm.
God, which we now know is only the longitudinal array, which is the physics of lucid dreaming, obviously.
Yeah.
So they were right about being able to communicate with the array, which you call connection to source. And the fall is losing that connection, which I call physicsofsoul.com, and teach that only the implosive compression you call bliss gives you that connection.
Right. And on one little breadcrumb, which we can't take up now in detail, but it's woven into our whole discussion here, is that we're on probation, if you want to say. We've been kicked back, we've been put
Agreed.
back into the to
Agreed.
the our little galactic corner. We've been sent to the corner,
Yeah, I
and
agree. And
for
we're
a
in
do-over,
quarantine. The
and we're
museum
in
is in
quarantine.
quarantine. Absolutely.
Right, right. So, and we got our our behind, whacked along the way a little bit too.
Yeah.
I'm no doubt there was a little bit of no pain, no gain in that one. Get your ass and moving and get out of our sector of the galaxy, whatever it was. Go back home, get your own shit together before
Which
you
is
come out here and party again, in our corner of the
which
galaxy
is
or whatever.
exactly Penny's message about the Galactic Federation kicked all the Dark Fleet cultures out and said back inside the Oort cloud. So there's one more lesson I think that parallel that should be developed in this regard is that remember all of the ETs only wandered in here recently just after we messed with the nukes. So, and now we're clear. Every time we mess with nukes, it messes with a billion civilizations in all directions. So, of course, they
Oh,
wander over
yes.
saying,
And
who's
I
making?
was not a yogi, nor was I a conscious SSP person at the time.
Yeah,
I was just a kid in science class. I was 12 or 13 years old.
yeah.
And when you first learn about, the atom bomb and, everything Hiroshima, my mind just zapped and said, you're messing with a whole lot of stuff. My mind just said, you're interrupting the whole fabric of the
That's
cosmos.
right. The complete fabric of space-time. We need to understand the physics that fission instead of fusion radiates in billions of timelines in all directions, and all other dimensional intelligences in the whole neighborhood say, "Oh shit, somebody just stirred the muck and came running over here." Even Roswell is minutes from the center of the nukes. Hello, why did they show up? It's very simple. It's because
Well,
the,
people
so
talk about Montauk and Junior. They ripping Junior that big,
yeah.
whatever, that lumbering blob that came out. Uh, and that
He
was that was a localized rupture.
Yep,
But when you think of all since Trinity,
exactly. That's
Trinity all the way through Hiroshima, Trinity, Nagasaki. Those are the ones that got all the publicity. But how many above ground and below ground testings are going on, and
exactly.
everything? It doesn't
And
matter whether you do it underground or you do it in the Pacific Ocean and
yeah,
Bimini Islands.
you got billions of astral parasites coming in every time.
Exactly.
And this
So
is
that compared to Montauk, though
yep,
all that nuclear testing
that's right. So we
since actually the Germans had it a little bit ahead, but they used it in a different way that freaked out the Russians. They didn't make a bomb out of it.
yeah,
They made another kind of a weapon on it, which is equally freaky. That's Joseph P. Farrell covers that in a whole lot of detail in his accounts
pulsar.
too.
Yeah, it's a
So,
pulsar.
but the point is, we've been ripping holes again and again and again
Exactly.
and again and
Exactly.
again. That's the whole point I'm
That is
making.
the point.
Now they're
And so
talking about doing it again.
that's right. So the idea is to understand the critical nature of the fabric of time, which is precisely what's torn for galaxies wide every time we do a damn nuke. So why
Yep.
do you think the ETs are famous for flying over all the US nuclear silos and proving they can switch them off anytime they like, as they testified before the US Congress? I think
That's
that's
another bread.
hilarious.
That's another breadcrumb we should take up, but we don't have time now. How do they turn them off?
They
That's the
switch them,
interesting
man. They
part.
switch them right off.
I know, but there's different ways of doing that
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Either mechanically through a
Well,
mothership
but
or a
that's the
scout
thing.
ship.
Once you understand why a magnetic line of the Earth grid, as Bruce Cathy proves,
Right.
dramatic reduction in nuclear critical mass every time you're at a magnetic line cross point. Hello, does that tell you what nuclear critical mass is? It's coherent longitudinal interferometry. Hello. And by the way, that's how the Ark of the Covenant, the Syrian device, was originally designed as a non-destructive container for the nukes. And what did the Anunnaki have to use to get through the Van Allen belt? The nukes,
Hmm.
because they were klutzes.
Oh, of course.
And
Well, the other part is about what I was going to say is, of course, we have, this illusion of space. Well, it's the quantum paradoxes of the thing that most of the between what we call particles in an atom, relatively speaking, there's more space inside of a single atom than there is
yeah,
actual particles in an atom.
it's
You
not
know, and
there's not a particle, it's just compressed charge. That's what it is.
yeah, yeah, right. It's compressed charges. So in fact, we're basically a whole bunch of empty space held together by charges.
Exactly.
And
Rotating
and
charge.
and and that's just our little microcosm here talking on Zoom right now, back and forth to each other, and even the sofa and the chair we're sitting on, for that matter. So on the cosmological level, or you could say in the cosmic level, we could compress a whole galaxy into the size of the head of the pin. So
Yes.
what we call, a million light years away or 10,000 light years away and everything, once you got the key,
But
how to use it,
and
they
and
might
the
as well be right next door to you.
but
So
the
in other words, interdimensionally, it's not 10,000 light years away. It's right with us right now. Everything, the whole universe is right here and now.
and
It was,
the key is obviously one specific physics, which is fractal non-destructive compression, the definition of the cause of gravity and consciousness and conscious evolution. So, which
yeah.
is the solution to fractality in time, the solution to origin of negentropy, and the solution to evolution of consciousness, and the solution of how to make a soul, and the only solution to alchemy, actually. So, the discovery of the physics of compression is the answer to every question, actually.
Mm.
And that's what our fractalgut.com, now the world's leading grand unified field theory, number one rated by Grok 4, teaches the specifics of that how gravity is emerged is specifically when compression is fractal, it becomes centripetal, negentropic, and self-organizing. And that is the only answer to a physics which is condemned to death that currently believes that only entropy is possible when they don't know why anything is centripetal or negentropic, which is why we're laughing at them. But we shouldn't laugh because right now they're ripping up the fabric of the children's cradle. Oops.
Yeah,
And but so
definitely.
that maybe we have to finish this another time and we want to go into your story more. But the one story to the Mori we might have for this evening is have we learned something about why the only Templar agenda of Thoth was repair of the fabric of time, and the fabric of time is really the issue of the nukes, and it's really why we attracted the attention of the ETs here in the first place because the kids were ripping up the fabric of their own nest. What a bunch of dummies. And so
Not
now,
only of our own nests,
yeah,
their nests,
exactly.
everything.
Precisely. Yes, exactly. And that's why
Exactly.
what we mean by the grail is the onset of the fractal implosion, both in the blood, which is directly the physics of bliss, your Ananda, which enables us to get centripetal enough to steer tornadoes big enough to repair the fabric of time, called the grail bloodline, etc. So yeah, I think we've actually come somewhere tonight, hopefully linking the East and West religions. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, let's say we've made our first venture steps. We could take every one of our comments and turn it into a separate podcast practically.
Yeah.
And we have the potential of that down the line. If we want to, approach it that way, we can, and we can plan it out that way too.
Yes. And
It doesn't have to be forced. It can be organically can grow out of our understanding and also paying due respect to the audience who are your subscribers primarily because we're coming on your channel. So we want to be relevant to the understanding and the interest of the people who are your follow who have tuned into you in particular. So you might also put it out there, in the comments, say, hey, give us your feedback. What do you want to know? What if in the future, what should you go over? And we can take our time and move into all these different things. Also, I would like to have some. I remember one thing that I learned in what was it as a I was a junior in high school, and I took a psychology class. It's not that part isn't so important, other than the fact that I learned the uh, the meaning of the word working definition. In other words, we use terminology in either in the social sciences, in the physical sciences, or even in philosophy and metaphysics, and we use terminology in religion. So we have sometimes one word that has different meanings contextually to those different aspects of our, psychic
Ah,
and explorations.
that's
So
great.
when we use the word soul, or we use the word implosion, or we use the word centripetal, or we use the word bliss, we have to say, while we're having this conversation, you're coming from your background, I'm coming from my background, and if we're going to use this word, maybe we should have a working definition so that when we
Yes.
use that word, we have
Well, of
contextually,
course,
we have communication
I
on
have
that
been
point.
teaching the physics of bliss for over 30 years
But
and have been
yes,
measuring it in
exactly,
detail in 30 years. And we
exactly.
have almost 100 films now at physicsofsoul.com. So there is some
Yeah,
context here. Thank you. And
yeah.
you're obviously right.
But some people who are not uh, well read in all that stuff, the
Yes,
people who I always sharing this out to people who have probably not come to your channel before, people are coming say through the yoga channel and through all this,
yes,
they're going to say, hey, what are they talking about? What are they talking about? Can you slow down a bit? Can you slow down a bit?
yes.
Well, one way is I can send them over to your website, your
But,
channels, and all
but
your.
But I
We can.
have to say that when we asked Grok 4, after we showed that golden ratio implosive compression is the cause of gravity, and we said, Grok 4, then you need to figure out the cause of consciousness. The Grok 4 scratched its head for a while and came back and said, oh, you're going to need to measure golden ratio and EEG brainwaves. And then we replied, oh, we just been doing that for 30 years. Here's the data. And that's the moment that Grok 4 says, oh, you have a grand unified field theory. But
True.
last question for you, and mostly as a seed for the next time. But
Okay.
I would like to ask, and just maybe 3 minutes if you would. But since we're teaching people how to get coherent in the astral and coherent in lucid dreaming, and our plasma devices are one example, and brainwave golden ratio is another, flame in mind or phi rate. How did you first come to get coherent enough in the astral, for example, to meet the Draco there? How did you get coherent in the astral? Three
All
minutes?
right. I I have to put on record my earliest. People say, "What's your earliest memory in life?" My earliest memory of life, and a whole lot of gaps in between since that first memory, by the way, like everybody else, as we grow up, naturally we prioritize and we are. I was 1 year old in a crib in the military officers' compound on the U.S. Army post in Stuttgart, Germany. My father was a counterintelligence officer of the CIC post World War II. This was in 1954. I was born in the Army Hospital in Fort Ord, California, now decommissioned. By the way, they're using that base now underground for adrenochrome, of all things, but we
Oh,
won't go there.
oh.
Um, but before my first birthday, he's transferred back to Germany, where he was started out, and he was in the CIC Counterintelligence Corps, which I can only imagine what he was doing. But anyway, so I'm in my crib. I don't know how to talk yet. I don't know how to walk yet. But there was two strong memories I had in the crib, and they were astral experiences, out of body experiences. One of them was trauma. That was breaking free, like I was in a cocoon. I was breaking out of a cocoon or out of a live burial underground and or out of some sort of confinement. And it was really traumatic, like, ah, getting out. The other part was I'm out in space looking down on Earth. The Earth is rotating on below me, the whole globe. I mean, I'm far away to see the whole globe, maybe near the Van Allen belt for all I know. And I have an adult consciousness saying, this is my new home. I've come here to be here. Now, I'm a 1-year-old kid that hasn't formulated even the words of my own thoughts yet in the crib, in my baby life. I'm having an adult consciousness in my astral form as a 1-year-old child. So
Wow. Wow.
what's going on here? And
Beautiful.
those pair, the trauma plus that had repeated cyclically at different times in my life throughout my childhood. So I'm an only child, no brothers and sisters. Father transferred every 3 years, moving around bases here, there, on base, off base, this thing, that thing. So growing up, I used to go out of my body, fly around, do all kinds of things. I lived like a hermit. I didn't have any brothers and sisters. So I had a very introversial life. I could go in and close my door and think about the world and think about God and the universe and all the other things. When I was in fourth or fifth grade, 8 or 9, we were in Minnesota. We had the bookmobile, and we had all this in science. And I was reading all the kids' science books. So I got the kids' version of Einstein and all these other things. My takeaway from it was that the universe is not infinite. The universe is a projection, and it has some sort of shape. So then they call it saddleback or the what do you call that?
Sombrero.
The sombrero, right? Or the Moebius,
Yeah.
you know
Mobius.
that thing, the infinity. So I used to lay in bed at night. Yep. I used to lay in bed at night in the summertime in Minnesota, in my room at night, and I wouldn't go to sleep. I'd just say, okay, the universe has a shape. I visualize myself going out to the edge of the universe. So here I am on the border, the boundary of the universe. If I turn one direction, it's the universe. If I turn the other direction, it's what? What? The void? Nothing? How did this happen? If I go to which is, of course, that's a paradox. If you could actually go stand on the edge, like you're right on the surface of the balloon, and you look in, that's the balloon, and everything we know is reality, and outside the balloon is what? And I would suspend myself in that void. It was like nirguna. It would be a Buddhist experience later on, or nirguna in Sanskrit, which means non-qualified state where there's no description, there's no subject, there's no object, there's no description. But I didn't have all those words yet. But somehow in the course of that, I learned, or I brought it from the past, the three omnis: omniscience, omnipresence, and omnipotence. So what happened was, I'm going to give the short version of it, and then we'll have a long version later if anybody's interested. I was sent off to summer camp with all of the kids on my block, all the Lutheran kids on the block. The parents wanted to get rid of us for a couple of weeks, in southern Minnesota where we were living. Mankato, by the way, it's the teachers' colleges there, which there's a whole lot of Illuminati shit going on in that place too. We can talk about later. But anyway, so all us Lutheran boys were sent off to one family at the end of the street. We were Baptists. The Baptists said, we got a summer camp. Come on over. So they put us on a bus without even telling us kids. We got off the bus. We're at a Bible camp. But so there was not going to be, it's supposed to be fun in the sun, but anyway, there was chapel and Book of Revelations and the Mark of the Beast, and Lord knows what was all laid on us. But anyway, one night after chapel, I'll give the details later. I went and sat out in the forest by the lake, one of Minnesota's 10,000 lakes. The preacher thought I was going out to pray. I fled the chapel's evening chapel ceremony out the back door. So the preacher thought the Baptist preacher thought I was going out to do the prayer, find Jesus or something. I don't know what, or to know what heaven was. I went and sat there and I said, what am I supposed to be doing here now? God, because what's prayer? I said, if you're omniscient, you know everything before I think it, before I say it. So I don't need to say anything here. I'm just, okay, nothing to say because you already know it. You're omniscient. Then I said, the mosquito's biting me, the moon is in the sky, and all these things. So if you're omnipresent, you're in the mosquito, you're in the moon, you're in the leaves that are rustling, you're in my body, you're in my blood, you're in every part of me, you're in the whole cosmos. And if you're not omniscient or omnipresent, I'm talking to the wrong guy. And I said, well, what am I supposed to do? What can I do? Well, you're omnipotent. You're in control of everything. You have all the powers of the the smallest particle, the smallest of the universe and the greatest of the universe. You have you're the guiding force. So there's nothing, I'm nothing in comparison to the power of the will of the cosmos. So if you're not omnipotent, I'm talking to the wrong guys. So then I said, well, what am I doing here? So I just looked down I folded my hands and cross-legged, and I just said to myself in English, thought to myself, I am God. And when that happened, big burst of energy from the bottom of my spine came up and gushes and gushes.
Kundalini.
Charges came.
Oh, that's great.
Well, I later understood it to be Kundalini, but I was just experiencing it then, and I was in bliss. I was floating in the clouds.
Yeah, we say that's the turning point when you decide you are the tornado.
So exactly. Well, that was summer of 1964, age 10. I went back and I spaced out with the preacher and I got him high. And then I said, I'm going to be with my family for 8 more years until I graduate high school. Then I'm out of here. I'm going to do this. My whole life is going to be dedicated to that experience. Now, what happened after that, I moved, 10 years old. That was 10 years old when I had my first Kundalini. Now, I didn't have a literal astral out-of-body experience. I just had the whole kind of samadhi version of that. Now, when I turned 13 and puberty kicked in, things started happening to me. Also, by happening, it was on a military post in just outside of the Pentagon on my dad's last assignment. And I started feeling like I was being, in my bed, I was being spun like in a cocoon of energy.
You talked about that.
In a vortex. Anyway, so then I was in paralysis.
Yeah.
Sleep paralysis, they call it. And maybe that's a phenomenon that's part of a physiological description or psychological description. But when you have it, you have it. You're not asleep and you're not awake, but you're not asleep, right? And you can't breathe. You can't move your muscles. And then what happened was this big reptilian Draco came and hovered right over my face.
Oh, yeah.
Right in my face. And that was spooky. If I could have had control of everything, I probably was shitting my pants at the moment.
KB, I'm just going to pause for once. I'm pausing for a second. Okay. So continuing, KB is saying how he first got coherent in the astral. Go ahead, finish
Right.
Yes.
Well, coherence with other beings in my face in the astral, let's put it that way.
You met a Draco.
Yeah, now I understand to be a Draco, but I mean, it was every bit, Draco. And it was, naturally, we have that first association with the way we're imprinted in religion, especially in Western religions, about the devil, something, demonic. Because, we play around at Halloween and we do all those things, but he doesn't look like us, right? And it was spooky. I mean, there was definitely a fear factor there. I mean, there was vibes too. I mean, I was just like flowing in my adrenaline and all kinds of hormones were flowing. And I'm just like 13 years old, And so it was spooky. And now I don't know, because then I finally got my breath back and I went out into what I thought was sleep, and the astral image imprint went away. Whether that was also simultaneously with a particular abduction.
Yeah.
That part, but the feeling of apprehension and everything stuck with me and all that. So then that started happening periodically. Now, on the other side of puberty, I was 16 and I was diving really deep into all the metaphysical stuff, East and West. I mean, everything. Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, Zen, because I have Japanese in my past life and all that stuff too. And again, this time I was out of my body and I was literally very lucid out of my body and I was in some kind of an old castle. What I imagined to be like you're walking around in some King Arthur's castle or something. And I was going up some hallway and then to an opening, which was, it was kind of a round shaped room. And it was like the parapet of a castle, where, one of those little rooks, like the rooks on the chessboard, the
But
round.
remember, here the point is to teach people how to get coherent in the astral. You
Right.
story, but okay, but
So
that's the
I'm
point.
I'm approaching. There's a being, right? There's a being, astral being, in front of me, wearing a cowled robe, like the Trappist monks with the pointed cowls. Only with the Trappists are usually light brown or white. This was a indigo color, a deep indigo color robe. So then I walked up behind, or I floated up behind. The being turned around, pulled back his cowl, and it was what now I understand to be the priestly Draco, which means the blue-green color rather than the white or the red of the priestly of the royal class. And then I was just came and we came face to face, and he opened the eyes. There's initial apprehension, but he opened his eyes, and in the pupil of his eyes was the whole stars of the cosmos.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly there was no fear.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went out of my, and then I floated up, kind of again ascended. At that moment, I ascended. My Kundalini again went up, and I went into samadhi.
Mm-hmm.
So that experience, and then all the way through it, I formally learned the meditation practice of the Ananda Marga system on a spring break right after my 18th birthday. I was keeping my 8 years promise with my family. So all these things started. I became a vegetarian at 17, and I gave up all intoxications and hallucinogens by the time before my 18th birthday. And I was like almost prepared. And right after my birthday, I started the actual meditation. And then I was getting regular visits again by the Dracos. But as I was learning my meditation, and we can go into detail later, all the way through, even when I went to India to be monastic training, when I went to Japan for 20 years, I've been having periodic visits again in the astral with the Dracos, but no more fear. Now it was like, hey, dude, good to see you again, like that. And there was no apprehension, no fear, no abduction, or no sensation of being violated or being, anything. It was just saying like, all right, hey, come along with me. And then I had certain processes of meditation. So I'd say, come on with me. And I would bring him along with me. Him, I assume it was a male, through my chakras, starting at my root chakra, and it brings each chakra up in the meditation with him. And I bring him up to sit with me in my crown chakra. Come and sit with me up here in my crown chakra. And there was just a kind of a symbiosis was going on, and I lost all my fear. Now, I'm not saying if one of these guys just suddenly walked into my room, all 3D, like, and they smell different than we do. Those people who you hang out with them, they say they stink, or we probably stink to them, and they stink to us.
Yeah,
And your mind is going
they
whoopie
say
doo.
they say that the aura of most Dracos would kill most humans, just the aura alone.
Right. So I'm not going to. So I'm saying that it's a combination of those things plus a few consultants that I had uh, along the way, post from the 2010 onwards. I was involved in all the different conferences with all the SSP and all the whistleblowers that apparently I've been told that it was confirmed that by some counselors who had access to whatever those databases are out there, because I gave them my detailed birth details, my birth name, and even my father's military name. And when they track cross-referencing all this, you were picked up when you were 1 year old, and you were abducted so many times in between for all different levels of training. And they gave me some examples of where I was out there. And though I don't have any 3D memories, a la what Matt Tracy or Penny or Johan will share, I have associative memories because those things that I did out there, I replicated here on planet.
Yeah.
That's
Matt
the thing.
Matt remembers his family as among the Draco. It sounds like so we're we have met and encountered the enemy, and it is us.
Yeah.
This was a beautiful introduction, extremely powerful, and many messages there. And on another occasion, let's pursue then how we translate those meditations, for example, into lessons in how you got coherent in the astral. Obviously, a powerful and beautiful story. But for
Mm.
tonight, I think we've done our thing. We really had a really great time, and we went through some wonderful stuff. And your story at the climax is very powerful, and we should meditate on that. So I thank you. To be continued, and
And
Dr. KB.
greetings to everybody, and everybody have a good time in the mid-October in the south of France. I wish I could join you, but I have other, I'll say, limitations that prevented me from, hopping on a plane this time around. Maybe in the future,
Well,
we'll
thanks.
never say never.
So we're talking about our conference,
Yes, yes. I
205
also put an announcement up in my Telegram
Thank
group
you.
also. So anybody
October
who comes to my,
October
yeah,
9. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dada KB, and thank you, Valerie, for introducing. And I think we had a great conversation tonight. To be continued. Thank you. Thank you again. Blessings.
you
Bless.
can put pause now, I guess.
Okay.